Greetings. This is the International Council for Small Business, and this is the ICSB Exchange webinar. My name is Ayman Tarabishi. I'm Deputy Chair of the Department of Management at the George Washington University. I want to thank you all for joining this exciting ICSB Exchange webinar. And I'm also delighted to invite and thank Debbi Bacq, Dr. Debbi Bacq, for hosting this very important social entrepreneurship session. Debbi, greetings from Washington, D.C. How are you doing?
Good, we're doing good.
Wonderful. The floor is yours to introduce the other panelists, and we look forward to this great session.
Great. Well, thank you all. We have this opportunity to bring together some experts from around the world to help us think through about social entrepreneurship during these challenging times with COVID. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to bring in such amazing experts into the panel. For those of you that have not been introduced, our three panelists today, and then we have a special guest as well. Khanjan Mehta is the Vice Provost of Creative Inquiry at Lehigh University, and if you don't know him, he actually ran the engineering program, the social entrepreneurship and humanitarian engineering at Penn State University, and has been working with students abroad for years and really had to make some adjustments this year because of COVID-19. Myself, Debbi Bacq, I teach at Wingate University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also run Social Change Innovators. Sophie Bacq, she is actually from Belgium, correct?
Correct.
Yes, and she's now at IU. She transferred there, and she's been working with doctoral students on social change and actually helped participate in this crazy design sprint, idea sprint that I heard about recently. So she is here with us as well. Of course, you all know Ayman from ICSB. And our special guest is David Norton. He's working with the COVID CAP team out of Duke University, and they've got together over 300 different capital resources for social entrepreneurs right now. So before I get started, I have to do my little graphic animation of our course plans, and everything else we plan to do have been thrown out the window. And everything's kind of adjusting and changing on the fly. So what we're going to do is start off and talk about how to adapt a program very quickly, change on a dime, and it's also kind of international courses and what some of the changes that Khanjan had to do. Preparing online teaching resources and those resources that are available to us, training and programs that are being offered for faculty to help us be better at our teaching and help our students, the capital resources through COVID CAP, and then we want to have as much Q&A as possible. And we'd really like for all of you to put in the chat box what you came here for, what do you want to learn, what are your questions, and we're going to try to answer those as we go. And each of us are going to try to keep our presentations down so that we can make sure that we have lots of time for Q&A. So I'm going to lead it off to talk a little bit about Mountaintop Initiative and some of the change there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Debbi. Good morning, everybody. As Debbi said, my name is Khanjan Mehta. I serve as the Vice Provost of Creative Inquiry at Lehigh. And I believe very strongly that as a university, we are here to prepare students to lead lives of impact. And when I think about lives of impact, there's impact in terms of improving the human condition, but also impact in terms of finding your ikigai, finding your reason for being, finding this intersection between what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. In other words, finding this intersection between your passion, mission, profession, and vocation. And we believe that we can do that. Do I have control over the slides to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we believe that the way we can do that is to help students develop the perfect combination of skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios. And we talk quite a bit about a mindset-led education, just like most universities are engaged in these conversations on mindset development. And this combination of mindset, skill sets, and portfolios help students develop their identity, develop their agency and self-efficacy, reach a higher level of consciousness, and most importantly, find their sense of purpose and belonging in the world. And to develop these skill sets, mindsets, and portfolios, we don't want students to take more courses and take more exams. That's not how we're going to do it. I think it has to be, I think we need to engage our students in incredibly authentic, meaningful, real-world projects. And we do that in many different ways, including on our beautiful Mountaintop campus, where we have about 120,000 square feet of high bay space that used to be the research headquarters of Bethlehem Steel. And now we fund teams at Mountaintop to work on all kinds of projects. So I'm going to talk about how we are responding to COVID. But before that, I wanted to quickly go through the program with you. We fund about 25, 30 teams every summer. We would have had about 29 teams at Mountaintop this summer, working on all kinds of projects. And about, these are, by the way, these are all multi-year projects where the projects typically start in the summer and then continue into the academic year through a set of interdisciplinary courses that sit across all the colleges at the university. So these are not summer projects, these are multi-year endeavors with one team passing the baton on to the next team until they have a spectacular failure or a wonderful success. And it's very common for projects to last 3 to 5 years and lead to new ventures, a whole stack of publications, all kinds of things. And so these could be projects where we just had a team that figured out how to convert drywall, thousands of tons of which we throw into landfills and convert drywall into fertilizer. Or we had a team that has been working on social justice theater to educate people about mass incarceration across the country. So these are a very wide area of ventures. They all have to be, they're interdisciplinary by nature. And typically a third of them work in the global social impact space, and they are grouped together in a program that we call the Global Social Impact Fellowship. And we have a wide array of ventures, and I'm going to give you a couple of quick examples. Great. So across all these ventures, student teams engage in systems design, develop their business strategies, their execution strategies, and then in field validation and execution. And our 3 largest ecosystems are in Sierra Leone, followed by Philippines, and then Kazakhstan, where we work with the universities, various nonprofit partners, industry partners, the government, to advance these multi-year ventures forward. So move forward.
Okay.
All right. So here is just one example of a project. We have a team that has been working on a low-cost diagnostic device to screen women for urinary tract infections and preeclampsia. And this is important because Sierra Leone has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. And we are trying to fight it through several different ways, one of which is this diagnostic device. We also have a team that has been working on making a documentary on safe motherhood in Sierra Leone. And that is trying to address a problem from a very different perspective by educating people about what's being done and shining the spotlight on some of the innovations that are actually working. So in this, for this test strip, for example, we had teams that worked in the lab on some of the bench science to design this device. They produced a whole bunch of papers over a 4-year period. We had students negotiate with a vendor in China that now manufactures this device. We had our student teams put together a more than 100-page docket that went to the Pharmacy Control Board, which is the FDA equivalent, the regulatory body, to get regulatory approval for this device, and eventually get approval. They raised the funds, they hired the employees, and right now about 300,000 women have access to this device, and we are trying to get it to a catchment area of about 3 million people over the next year. So this is just one example of a multi-year project. And so if you think about what our students had to work on for this project, they just didn't design the test strip. But if you look at the visual on the right, it captures how they had to design the device, but they also had to design a whole bunch of materials to train the trainers and the health workers on how to use the device. They had to develop various data collection and progress monitoring tools. They had to develop service level agreements with the government, and essentially more than 40 different artifacts to advance this venture forward and to get the test strips to fulfill their destiny of saving lives. So in essence, if I kind of zoom out of all these different projects across our ecosystem, here are some of the characteristics. These are all the projects and their aspirations are not something you can accomplish in a summer or a year. And so everything we do are multi-year ventures over longer time horizons. Go forward.
Sorry.
We really push evidence-based approaches. And so we have rigorous research expectations from every single student across the program. And we expect them to have at least one manuscript that is submitted to a conference or a journal by the time they wrap up their one-year fellowship within the program. Given the realities of the universities, we have incredibly practical partnerships that let us scale these ventures as they emerge. To accomplish something like this, like the test strip project itself, for example, it started with seed funds from within the university, but then we've leveraged more than $250,000 of extramural funding to advance the venture forward. And these are all highly competitive funds, and we work closely with our students to develop the proposals and submit them. Sometimes the proposals go through our nonprofit partners because that's a much better fit for that source of funding. Go forward. Across all our projects, we're not working on a single product or service. It's always an ensemble. So the emphasis here is on systemic innovation and entrepreneurship. And that actually works wonderfully in times like these. It's about sustainable, scalable impact. We don't focus on communities. We work with communities, but our goal is not to improve things for a community. The focus is on markets, and the focus is on advancing and transforming systems. Forward. Great, thank you. So these require large investments on our part to even identify these opportunities. And so typically there's a 9 to 12 month incubation time before the project actually enters the academic arena, and we recruit students and we bring in the right faculty expertise to advance it forward. And finally, we have very high expectations. So this is a very selective program. We currently engage about 75 to 80 students on the global projects, and about 150 students across all the projects put together, and invite a very specific set of faculty. And when they work on these, you make it very clear that you do this not to focus on the learning outcomes, but to focus on the outcomes beyond the learning outcomes. How are we advancing knowledge? How are we advancing praxis? How are we actually tangibly changing the world and delivering impact? And in that journey, if you learn something, good for you. But that's not my in times like these, with all the madness that's going on, I like to think of COVID as a wonderful opportunity. We talk quite a bit about preparing students for a world that is a VUCA world. Some of you might have heard this term before, but the idea is that the world is becoming increasingly vulnerable, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. All right, so vulnerable, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous. This is the time. And so this is a real challenge for our students, and this is exactly what we want them to learn, is how to keep advancing your work forward in times like these. So given the fact that our students are working on so many different aspects of the venture, some of the teams that are not able to do experimental work on a sickle cell diagnostic device for $2, which has to be done in the research lab, they're looking at other ways in which they can advance that work forward. And then in the fall, hopefully things get better and they'll be able to get back in the lab. So it's just an incredible amount of pivoting, identifying other threads of inquiry, finding the right expertise, and advancing the venture forward. This would not happen if our project was a one semester or one summer project. But given the fact that these are multi-year projects, it's very easy to pivot. Also, the last thing I would say is that given the fact that we have partners in country, they pick up some of the things that we're not able to do here. So we work very closely with a nonprofit in Sierra Leone. A number of our teams have full-time employees that they work with. And we serve as the intellectual partners for ventures, on which our in-country partners serve as the operational partners. And so with that model, we are able to offload a lot of tasks that are very specific to the context on our in-country teams. And that can happen if and only if they're also not in lockdown. And that has been one of our other challenges. So really happy to take questions and get into details. But for now, I'll turn it over to Debbi. Thank you. You're muted.
I muted myself. It's very hard to manage these presentations and talk at the same time. So feel free, as I said, to put in the chat any questions you have, because we do want to try to address everything throughout the presentation. The next part is we created Social Change Innovators as an online platform for faculty who are teaching in social entrepreneurship and social innovation space. What we found is because the field was so new, it actually started in 2003, but all of us, we didn't have books, we didn't have very many articles at that point, and so we were all trying to figure out what these resources were. So we started curating them. And in 2018, we put together this online platform, and the link is down there, socialchangeinnovators.com, where you can click on it and actually look at the website. This idea of connecting and sharing resources was for faculty from around the world to share resources. And I'll give you a great example. I was teaching social entrepreneurship in a course, and you know, you're always looking for these new content and ideas. And this woman, Anna, from Australia, actually, she would send all of the slides. She would look at my slides, and then she would add to her slides for a master's level course. And then I would look at her materials, and I would make updates to my slides with those materials. And that whole sharing process was just amazing because my prep time went down dramatically. And that's really what our objective is. So if you go into socialchangeinnovators.com, you can literally see the 12 teaching modules. We've added a couple as well, where if you're in the middle of the semester, for most people, we're towards the end of the semester. Some universities have actually ended. And so you've taught a lot of these concepts. But we added like design thinking, if you want to do an idea sprint or something like that, there's more resources from Stanford on those. Scaling social impact, we're going to add in the COVID CAP materials and some of the other resources that we've had available. If you wanted to change your course at the end of the semester and kind of do this last hurrah with your students to make them feel like, okay, now how do I change the world during COVID? How do I make myself address some of these issues or get involved? And what Ashoka's done is curated some materials as well under the Changemaking 101 module. I want to point out this new module, systems mapping, has been phenomenal. The team actually is Anna Johnson from Oxford, Daniela Happy Thornton, if you know her, she used to be at Oxford as well. James is at University of Mount Royal, and they have a whole program on students mapping the system, and it's a full semester type project. But they've also provided all these materials under this module where you can download, have students watch a video, read an article about it, and then do an exercise or activity in your classroom. So that's really great to have those resources. Since most of us were doing problem-based learning anyway, what we learned is a lot of folks are trying to adapt because they're not able to do things in that same environment, especially those that can't be synchronous with their students online. So the Conscious Capitalism team actually teamed with Marketplace Simulations, and Marketplace did a great job and did the simulation with Conscious Capitalism. It's only 6 weeks, and you may even do it a shorter time period, but you literally can have the students make these decisions, not just financial decisions, but looking at the social and environmental impact of those decisions in the marketplace. So when I attach the slides, you literally will click on them and be able to go onto the website. There's a lot of videos that are available. We've curated those in a YouTube channel. And then IDEO has a really great toolkit, and we just missed the window of opportunity. I did one on COVID, but they're in the idea stage. But the reason I like Open IDEO is in the middle of the semester, I can literally see one of their new Open IDEO projects, put my students on the project over the research and idea stage. Most of them don't get past the idea stage because they're not as good, but it's a really fun way to jump them into a real live project with people from all over the world and getting a lot of materials and resources along the way. And their toolkit's available as well. I do want to do a plug for the Ashoka U Exchange because they are available right now. Thursday and Friday is their international conference. and it will be virtual. The price point is much cheaper than ever before. So if you want to jump in on that, the Ashoka Exchange is a great resource for you as an educator. Obviously, at the end of the semester, when you're pulling together your course, we want to make sure our students are tying everything back to the SDGs and which ones that they're addressing in their projects or whatever they're working on. So making sure that they have that deeper dive on the SDGs is great. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I wanted to bring out the B Corp movement. And it's in 71 countries now. There's a lot of companies that have registered, a lot of well-known companies like Patagonia, which we're super excited about, but then a lot of smaller businesses as well. And what I like about the B Corp movement for us as educators is we can get our non-socially kind of minded faculty who are teaching traditional entrepreneurship or traditional business, especially post-COVID, so that we're all thinking about how are we creating social change and as a business, not just making profits. So how do we look at the social impact and the environmental impact as well? So let's put those together. So look at that resource as well. Now I'm going to pass it on to Sophie to talk about some of the faculty training resources and this really cool idea sprint that they did at Indiana University.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. So hi, everyone. I'm Sophie Bacq from IU Kelley School of Business. I've been researching the topic of social entrepreneurship for about 13 years and teaching it for about 8 years. And I'm excited to share with you some ideas on teaching social entrepreneurship, but also some resources for our faculty out there or junior faculty or PhD students as well. So to give you a little bit of a background, social entrepreneurship, we take it for granted and we're assuming that everybody knows what it is. And you know, I can assure you that the consensus in the field is that we're not going to reach a consensus what it means. But in short, it means like bringing together a mission to alleviate societal issues, being problem focused, as Debbie just said, with using entrepreneurial skills, mindset, innovation, creativity, and so on. So you have the colliding of two concepts that used to be separate in the way that we thought about addressing issues. And so as social entrepreneurship educators, and that resonates with what Khanjan and Debbie just said, we want to have an impact. I want to have an impact on my students. I want to have an indirect impact through my students' action. I want to have a long-term impact. That's what Khanjan shared with this wonderful program that I just learned about at Lehigh. And to me, when I teach social entrepreneurship, I try to anchor my teaching in 3 core principles. One is conveying inspiration, and all the great resources that were presented so far help you do that, help you present thought leaders and exemplar social enterprises to students, some of which have been successes, some of which have been failures, as important, right, to learn about the different journeys that social entrepreneurs have undertaken. Calling them to action. So beyond learning something, Khanjan said that nicely, beyond learning something in a classroom or non-classroom setting, what kind of actions can you call your students to take, either as future social entrepreneurs, but also as future employees of larger organizations, which may or may not be corporations, but which, as we know now from this crisis, will have to address the societal issues, which are incredibly prevalent and urgent. So how can they make change and become change makers in whatever professional path they will take? And then finally, instilling critical thinking. So beyond the actions, it's really important to reflect on the consequences, unintended consequences of such actions, putting yourself into the shoes of the people, the communities, the projects you're trying to help, using empathy and so on. And so these are my core principles. And what we did is that we at IU, at the Management and Entrepreneurship Department, we embraced them as we were facing this crisis mid-March, and we were eager to take some action. We launched, we can go to the next slide, we launched in just a few days what we called a virtual idea sprint. It was an online social entrepreneurship weekend accelerator in response to COVID-19. So that happened March 20 to 22nd, so almost, about 3 weeks ago. It was during our spring break, and we gathered 20+ members of our department. We acted ourselves as social entrepreneurs. We used agility and creative thinking, design thinking to put together something that would lead to impact through actionable steps that our community of students, but also alumni and professional affiliates with the university could actually gather around and enact some change in response to the many challenges that COVID-19 has actually raised. The website is there, so covid19ideas.org. We have created a playbook that's a 50-page playbook. I have to say that the idea was initiated by one professor, Regan Stevenson, a colleague of mine in the management entrepreneurship department. And this playbook has been really shepherded by a PhD candidate, Brian Berkman at Kelley. And you have here all of the steps. If you wanted to replicate such an initiative at your institution, you have all of the steps, all of the faux pas and whatever mistakes we did as we really scrambled together something for impact that happened in less than a week. The weekend was 48 hours. I was in admiration of Khanjan's, programs that are long-term beyond the semester. That's kind of the reverse of that. It was just 48 hours. How can we put people together to ideate and then prototype some of these ideas? At the end of the day, we had over 200 participants generating 21 different ideas, 48 hours, and infinite social value. I don't know, time will tell, right? It takes time to see how these ideas and how value translates into tangible outcomes. But I will just talk about one example here on the left. You have a social media campaign. The hashtag, it's very tiny, but the hashtag is Real Heroes Need Masks. And these group of students and their mentors have been able to channel the donation of over 21,000 masks to IU Health so far. So that was one example. On the right, you can see how we organize this idea sprint, which is really based on the principle of design thinking. And usually you think a lot of paper and Post-it and pens and everything, like in-person meeting, and all of that dynamics was done on Zoom. And you can see here in the top left of the screenshot here, you have one of our PhD candidates being a mentor. On the top right, you have the chair of the department who was a mentor that weekend as well. So a lot of our faculty felt a need to take action and instill that ideas for change, and I think that's highly replicable. We've had University of Cambridge in the UK reach out to us to replicate. We've had replications at California State Polytechnic University, Valdosta University. There's been other such challenges organized by the MIT and Mass Challenge. It's just popping out, and the idea is just to spread the word. If you wanted to organize that as a capstone at the end of your course this semester, that could be a great idea as well. It just took 48 hours. It takes a few mentors, and they can be, professionals who just may have more time. So some people have less time, some people have more time in this situation. So that might be an idea if you wanted to do something that really compresses the idea generation and prototyping. So any questions, I can answer that later, but I hope you visit the website, and we're like disseminating all of the information. Another couple resources that I wanted to share. So this is the website here at the bottom, sedocsseminar.org is the website that will guide you to the information about the annual Social Entrepreneurship Doctoral Seminar. And I know that some people in the attendance here know about it. It's an annual seminar that is targeted to PhD students who want to learn more about social entrepreneurship scholarship, but we've had amazing faculty as well joining us. We're just focusing first on PhD students and having one faculty per year maybe. We usually have 10 students gathered for about a week over the course of 6 days actually in August before the meeting of the annual Academy of Management. As you can see, what else can I say? Well, I want to say that this was started by Professor Tom Lumpkin at the University of Oklahoma. Last year, we celebrated the 10th annual. So this year is going to be the 11th annual. And I started co-teaching it as of last year. So it's a real pleasure. I'm an alumnus from the seminar. It's a real pleasure to talk with PhD students and just take a deep dive in 50 articles in the field of social entrepreneurship. And I can tell you that the syllabus changes so much from one year to the next because the field is growing and there is like new grants are covered by scholars. I want to say an important thing. The deadline has just passed. We've received 10 applications and we limited to 10. But we're looking for more quality applications. So if you're interested, please visit the website and make sure that you send your application by the end of the week to Professor Lumpkin and I. So that's one resource for you. I highly recommend it. Debbie attended it a couple years ago. And so the annual Social Entrepreneurship Conference, you may know about it. It's a conference that was started by Joanna Meyer and Kai Harkerts and Jeff Robinson, 16 plus years ago. That was organized at NYU Stern for a couple years under the leadership of Professor Jill Kickel. These days, the conference goes back and forth between Jill Kickel's institution at University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business. And this is where the conference will be next November, 5th to 7th, hopefully, 2020 at USC Marshall in Los Angeles. We hosted it last year at IU Kelley. We had 123 attendees from 12 countries represented. We have Belgium, France, India, Israel, Mexico, the Netherlands, Norway, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, UK, and the US. So another global event if you wish to dig deeper into social entrepreneurship. I will share with you here in the chat just the program of the conference. We don't have a permanent website. We're working on that, but you can see in the IU app box link, you can see the entire program and who was there, what kind of topics we touched on. So thank you so much. I'll address the questions
before
later.
David goes, I'm going to jump back in here. One of the questions in the chat, we all keep saying social entrepreneurship, and we apologize. When the Social Innovation School of Thought is kind of where a lot of us have come from, and that's the innovative solution to a social problem. And we tend to come from using markets to be able to keep your organization sustainable over time with a social business model. And that kind of methodology kind of was brought up, kind of the US and the UK kind of follows that Social Innovation School of Thought with Greg Dees. There's also the Social Enterprise School of Thought, which is adopted more in the Europe, which has more of the mutuals and cooperatives, NGOs, charities, all into that model. And while we don't distinguish that it has to be a for-profit, I think from the true definition, it should be a for-profit venture that is pursuing a social change in this holistic viewpoint with environmental, social, and economic impact as well. So that's where we come from in that kind of the mindset. Next is going to be David Norris. David is on the team with Capital COVID Cap and Iman. We don't see him on screen. How do we get him on screen? Because he knows what he's doing. There he is. All right. So David, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to connect you all. My name is David Norris, and I'm a volunteer with covidcap.com. I've been part of the team for about 6 days. This is an effort that's really been run by Kathy Cook from CASE at Duke University. And what is COVID Cap? It's a capital relief aggregation for entrepreneurs everywhere. It's a searchable website to help any entrepreneur in the world locate cash relief in their community. It was launched on March 26th, and as I said, this is Kathy Cook's effort. She's been working day and night to get this thing built and designed and get data in there. So it contains listings for grants, loans, and cash equivalents. It is relevant for both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. So as of end of day yesterday, it contains over 450 resources and lists offerings more than $370 billion. 58 are global, which by our definition means it's offered to entrepreneurs in 2 or more countries. 122 are national, meaning they're offered to entrepreneurs across a single country. And of those, 60% are US focused. There are 256 are offered in states, counties, and cities in the US. So the primary reason for me to be here and share this information with you is just to, let you know that it's there. B, to encourage you to cascade it to your contacts and anybody you know who is looking for help, needs help identifying resources. And if you know anybody who is a developer who can help do some of the front end work for us, that would be great, because we're a little thin on those resources. As I said, we're business people. We're not necessarily good on the UI piece of the work. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's my plug. And like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I do want to go ahead and just specifically, so David, we only have them for a little bit of time, is if you have any specific questions about the COVID-19 Capital Relief Program, this is the website when you get into there where you can search for the resources that are available and the money. So David, if you could talk a little bit about how the search works.
Sure. I mean, there are two navigation tools here. You can either search. So if you can go in and search for women, if you were looking for a women specific resources, or if you wanted to search for a specific country. So there are resources available for entrepreneurs in Nigeria or in Okanagan County, Washington. So you can use any of those search terms will work. You can also just click through and it's sort of a click through navigation to find what your it's driven based on geography about where you are and what resources are available for you. And we are a team of volunteers, so we're adding things. And what you see now is an example of one. It's a very local resource. And it usually is a quick description of what's available, and then it will link you to where you can apply for or find out more about that particular resource. So we're adding resources all the time. There's plenty of volunteer opportunity here to keep going, because there's a lot out there. I'd say we are doing pretty well in the North America, specifically United States. But internationally, we are, I would say it's a little harder to get our hands on good lists of resources.
Good. Great. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
And if you have no further questions, David can go back to his real job. He's just doing this on the side for fun, but I'm going to double check the chat and make sure there's no other questions. We have the only place that you can add the chats in, the questions are in the chat, so feel free to ask your questions now. From a time perspective, we left 20 minutes intentionally for any questions that you may have, or if Ayman has questions as well. So Hans had a question about Asia Pacific, David. Are there some resources there?
There are a number of them in India, but for the rest of that region, we're pretty thin. So, so far we've been driven by people submitting their resources to us. There is a form online that you can hit, and I'll put the URL for that here. And that resource comes in, we vet it and add it to the database. We take lists. If you've got a list of 20 or whatever, we can ingest that, and then I can publish that through the database as well. So right now, though, like I said, Asia Pacific is one of the areas where we don't have a lot of listings at this point.
Okay. Thanks, David. We appreciate it. One of the questions that came out from the chat was Christina. Is social entrepreneurship a synonym for humanity? Anyone want to try to take that? Now, I'm actually in a session on Friday. The entrepreneurship conference, the California Entrepreneurship Conference, they're doing a panel on this, and there's humanitarian entrepreneurship now, and it's a little bit different than social entrepreneurship, but it's a new field of practice that's been coming up. Unfortunately, I have not seen anything about human entrepreneurship. So, Khanjan, you probably with the humanitarian program
Debbie,
there.
I
think it's you, dude.
Debbie, I'll jump on this one here. This is a good point. Entrepreneurship and humane entrepreneurship is a major initiative that the International Council for Small Business started about 4 years ago. We have a special issue on JSBM on humane entrepreneurship, which is in the field of human or kind of what we're seeing today here. But it goes back to that question again, and maybe I'll ask all the panelists here. Isn't what we're seeing today that social entrepreneurship is actually the new normal? that why do we need to call it social anymore? Why can't we just call it entrepreneurship? Because the world needs more of this. Maybe that's the question. I know for years social entrepreneurship seemed more like it's an add-on, or it's a small group of people that are kind of fighting against corporate America and for-profit. But we see what's happening today. So maybe the question for all the panelists is, should we stop calling it social entrepreneurship, calling it just entrepreneurship, because this is what we're heading towards?
I can directly respond to it. My answer would be no, or at least not yet. From a very, very practical perspective, without getting the semantics of it, calling it social enterprise, people ask you, what does that mean? And are you like anti-corporations? And the answer is no. I'm actually very much of a conscious capitalist, but how do we leverage the discipline of business to solve real problems in the world and improve the human condition is what this is all about. So I think that hopefully 5 years from now, 7 years from now, all entrepreneurship will be social, but I don't know if we are there yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead, Sophie.
Oh, okay. No, I agree with Khanjan. I think that the trend is definitely growing when you think about, integration, which is this idea of how we're trying under the umbrella of sustainable development. Debbi mentioned the sustainable development goals, how we're trying to infuse values that are related to improving issues with regard to the planet or people, the human, right? So how we're trying to integrate that in the way we do business. We see a rise of such businesses, which can be called certified B corporations, social businesses. We see a rise of those. And what's important when you think a business perspective, right? And I know we discussed social innovation as opposed to social entrepreneurship, but when you take an enterprise perspective, if you use lenses such as stakeholder theory, you see that there's a lot of key stakeholders to businesses that are embracing these trends, right? Consumers are embracing the trends. Employees, you think of the generation of students we're dealing with right now, they're embracing these trends of being more pro-social. So I think the trend is definitely growing. Maybe 5 years from now, all entrepreneurship, most business will be conscious, socially oriented. I think the adjective's gotta stay, at least for now. The reason that this adjective might be misleading sometimes is that when the adjective was introduced, it was put in a position with traditional or commercial entrepreneurship, which some people push back saying, well, we're not here to make money. Entrepreneurship can be about self-fulfillment and other goals, which are personal. Maybe there was a false dichotomy that was created at first 20 years back. But I do believe that this idea of social or pro-social, which means in psychology pro-others, meaning you're for other human beings and the planet, it's got to stay for now. And if it becomes the new the new normal, maybe it will be called social entrepreneurship. I don't know what the semantics will be by then, but I think the trends are there with regard to all of the stakeholders and the external forces, which will hopefully push enterprises and corporations to include more of these pro-social objectives.
Mm-hmm. Good. I will add, Jim had talked about, Dennis Young said he uses the term social purpose organization, which I think that's a good point. The pro-social organizing has taken some attention as well in the research channels, and I think that's true as well. And I think too, as we need to be very aware of, it's not necessarily about the business that we have to make all those profits. It's that idea that it's a social purpose type initiative. But I will say this from a faculty perspective is I would like to see the day when there's not entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, it's just entrepreneurship. And if you look at your students, for those of you teach in both sides, that the students are coming from the non-business majors and they're much more engaged and ready to apply the social practices to business, but they don't have the business toolkits yet. And so I think that our teaching will be more from making the business side of social purpose organizations and social purpose organizing. I want to add on to a couple of the other questions that we have here. And who said it? Because now I'm losing my let me go. How do the educators balance ethics, gravity, and the depth of ideas needed to tackle social issues with inspiring those students and balancing the responsible with the ethical side of entrepreneurial business?
Debbie, can I comment on that?
Sure.
First of all, I'm so glad you picked that question up because that's an excellent question from Stephanie Rabel. And this is really important to us. So for all our students working on all these ventures, they sign up for a 1-credit workshop class in the spring, then another one in the fall that is post-field work. And in that class, a third of that class is focused on ethical decision-making as it comes to social enterprise and sustainable development. A third is focused on grassroots diplomacy, which we define as getting stuff done in a radically different cultural context in a harmonious manner. And the other third is focused on publication and systems thinking and strategy. But I think it's incredibly important to integrate this ethos of ethical decision-making. And I prefer that a little bit over ethics because ethics tends to be about all kinds of philosophical issues, and that's wonderful. But as innovators, I like the construct of ethical decision-making with a case-based approach. This is what happened. What exactly will you do next? And then think through all the different aspects and make good, sound ethical decisions that you can live with. And that's an excellent way of developing critical thinking skills, which, as Sophie pointed out, are really what a lot of this work comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Good. There was a question earlier about policy change and the role of social ventures in creating this policy change. Does anyone want to comment on that, or I can just add some of the Ashoka information? Okay. The policy change, what I would say is Ashoka has seen with all the social entrepreneurs that they have funded over the years that, and I don't have the exact statistic, it used to be, it was over 50%, I want to say it was 57% of the social innovators who got funding from Ashoka actually affected the governmental policies in the process. And so those policy changes, because they felt like they couldn't actually influence the communities and make the greater good impact they wanted to do without the government support. I think that's going to be one of the really cool things that happens under COVID is because of this pandemic, we're going to shift, and the governments of different communities and countries are going to be looking at their public policy programs and say, did we do enough? Have we have these policies in place that we could help people, as opposed to what might happen might be more a severe shift in the economics and a recession for most countries. Okay, another question from Barzina. What is the current dominant discourse on corona epidemic? Is it understood, interpreted as an opportunity for social entrepreneurs, or rather as a challenge? In your different contexts or countries, what are your insights? I should have thought on like the hand row.
Yeah.
I can do this one as well.
I can share some things too. You can
sure,
go ahead.
you go first, Sophie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a great question. That's why I think everybody pops. Like, oh, this is so deep. Well, I think, you know, depending on your hat, right? I think it causes so many challenges, so many levels. So I'm not going to speak from the institutional perspective. I think, you know, the leadership is definitely doing an amazing job, but definitely is encountering many challenges as a consequence of this COVID-19 pandemic. As a social entrepreneurship educator, I think it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to gear and orient the efforts of my students in this remaining of the semester to have them think through this real life challenges and problems that are then turned as opportunities. That's really the mindset I use as a social entrepreneurship educator. And I also think that to spread the word about what social entrepreneurship is, and I see amazing discussion going on in the chat, what you see a lot that existing enterprises or bigger corporations are doing these days, they're employing what I would qualify as social entrepreneurship behavior. Like everybody almost is forced to act as a change maker or social even innovator, if you so wish. So I think more opportunity than challenge, because I'm an optimist in nature. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I will say I had the opportunity to go to the School World Forum, and that is the premier organization for social entrepreneurs in the world. And as those of us that are educators, we don't get to go anymore because it's limited to 1,200 attendees at Oxford, but they made it virtual this year, and some of their panels and resources are available online. If you want to get more, I'll put in my email at the end so you can email me and ask for some of the links. But they, this opportunity that the pandemic has presented to social innovators, I think that mindset change is going to be so impactful for our field and our students and our administrations and our departments that I don't think it's going to be, our research has found that social entrepreneurship education is it's still higher in the business schools, but it's moving over to public policy, medicine, sciences. We get a lot more coming out of the science side, not just medicine, but other fields as well. And those are going to be teaching these types of courses and helping students to think about these problems and how to address them, but to build a business model around it to make it sustainable. And seeing the way that different innovators have come from not just social innovators that are already out there, but traditional entrepreneurial businesses and also our governmental or NGOs are also looking at how do we address these things in an innovative fashion to address the pandemic. I think in the end, we're going to end up with such a better society as a whole for the whole world, and a lot more moving away from this crazy nationalist that's happening in some of our countries into this more collaborative world where we see all people as well. So, and so, yeah, so I think the expected shift in entrepreneurship education is going to be great. So thank you, Marzina, for that. Wow, we're getting crazy with lots of questions along the way. There was one earlier. What tools are you using in your online social entrepreneurship courses to help it make things more interesting and more cooperative and engaging for the students? Nobody wants it?
I mean, I can quickly take it. So from our perspective, it's all about the ventures. And so the few workshops that we do have are very practical skills, everything from engaging in international research and managing IRB protocols to basics, like absolute fundamentals like the Osterwald, the business model canvas, to panel conversations on various cultural artifacts and how to design for different kinds of contexts and settings. So these are incredibly practical workshops and cases that we have developed over the years that are completely focused on helping students advance the venture forward. And happy to share any of these.
And on the socialchangeinnovators.com website, there are experiential activities that you can add that are in there and assignments you can do that can be done with students. You can put them on teams as well. You can have them do assignments in more engaging assignments independently, but preferably to do them in groups as well. And empathy mapping, although it's towards the end of the semester, I think during COVID is really good. The empathy mapping, Salesforce had some great resources at the School World Forum and some of their nonprofit work that they do. That's also under the Change Making 101 module for Ashoka. So we got another question. Could you please comment more on how vulnerable to COVID-related negative externalities are to social enterprises in comparison to other enterprises? Do we have any data that's available? Or do we have some information about the negative externalities specifically to the social enterprises? No data. So there was a ton of data that was presented by at the School World Forum workshops, but not everything was provided their materials, but I can send some links to everyone afterwards because we'll have everybody's emails that I can share. There also, there were some really great, if you've been going to the ICSB knowledge workshops here, last Tuesday, the woman from the ILO and their youth employment opportunities. Oh my gosh, all her slides, data, 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 and it just got out the last day. So the ILO is giving us lots of data that's coming out, but other organizations as well. And I'll get a database from Kristen Joyce, has a listing of some of these resources as well that I'll share with folks. But to have it off the top of my head, no.
Great. As we wrap this session here, maybe what we can do is go through all the panelists here, and maybe we'll start with Sophie here. If you wanted the attendees to walk away with 1 or 2 key points that you want to share with them, saying, this is what's in my heart about social entrepreneurship, and this is where I believe it's heading or should be heading, what would that be? And then we can go through across all the panelists and ask the same question.
That's a great question. I think that I may be biased because I see a lot of things through the lens of social entrepreneurship. I try not to be and use critical thinking myself, but I see social entrepreneurship as bringing a lot of hope ahead of the challenges that we will have to face. I think that by having communities work with each other, and we're seeing communities being more tightly knit these days, even though a lot of that happens virtually. But I think that a lot of social change can really happen by empowering communities, using self-help strategies to address their own problems. And I'm hoping that communities will be aware of the tools and methods and the skills that social entrepreneurship has to offer to address these challenges, which will include tough healthcare and economic challenges related to this crisis. So I see hope, and I will keep trying to inspire students, call them to action, and finally use their judgment and ethics and all of what we discussed. So hoping the tools that we're developing, and the data is key. So thanks, Debbie, for sharing that, and we'll keep working towards more of that data. It's critical.
Great, and then we'll move to Khanjan. What about you?
Sorry, what's the question again?
And last comments on the topic of social entrepreneurship, where you see it's heading?
I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I've been working in the space for about probably 15, 18 years, and it's just been an exponential rise in the interest. And students, to me, are really driving this. They want it, they want to engage, they want to have more impact in the world. And at least from an academic perspective, I see that as kind of one of the major drivers for why I'm very hopeful that 5-7 years from now, as we discussed earlier, all entrepreneurship will be social.
Yeah.
Great. And Debbie, you jumped early on saying, I need to do a webinar on social entrepreneurship. Your passion, and you're globally renowned as a leader in social entrepreneurship. So what about you? Where is your heart on social entrepreneurship, and where you see the future is heading?
Yeah. The social inequities in the world has been so disheartening for so many of us. And knowing this is happening, and you can see it because we have access to information more than ever before, but we all saw it, our students were seeing it, but the world wasn't seeing it. And as much as this pandemic has hurt people's lives and their economic incomes and what have you, I just feel like this holistic viewpoint of the world is going to shift, and it's going to shift in the right direction, where we are now all together thinking about how do we create social change, and we help all people in the world, not just people next door to us. So I think that this bigger picture of inequities with healthcare, climate change, I think COVID is opening our eyes and our hearts to something much greater than ever before. And we as educators have such a greater role in this, to spread the message, kind of the mission of social change to our colleagues across our campus, and not stay in our bubbles, because a lot of us, if you came from the business school, you tend to stay in the business school students, and it's got to be cross-campus initiatives and social change. And that's where the Ashoka team and Ashoka U team has really planted their stake in making sure it's a change-making campus. So I'm inspired by the session and having you guys. I thank you so much for joining us. And I thank the participants as well with your questions. We'll try to leave the chat open and answer some of these as well and share them. You can save the chat. If you do the double dots at the bottom where the chat is, you can save your chat so you can save their comments. And like I said, we'll get the email database and we'll share them with others as well. But thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you. I think social entrepreneurship has a great opportunity because of this COVID-19 situation to show the world that the beginning, the early adopters that were screaming on top of their lungs to pay attention to social entrepreneurship is important. And social entrepreneurship is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. It's tied to the ILO's work on decent jobs for youth. It's tied to many different multilateral organizations that are trying to help solve world's problems here. So this is not a one person, one school, one organization's fight. This is a global initiative that needs to be taken seriously. Today, the world is coming together, even though we're closing down borders, even though we're closing down many airlines and so on, right? But yet we are more socially connected than ever before. After COVID-19, a new normal will come in. These small businesses, these micro businesses, these young entrepreneurs, right, will realize that it's more than just about bottom line profits. It's about making the world a better place. Vis-a-vis, should it be called social or not social? These are words that you can use as you like to use as social innovation or frugal innovation or reverse engineering. And you can decide wherever you want to go with this. But at its heart, it's about humanity. It's about human values. It is about making an imprint, a footprint, a handprint in the world to make it better. The people here that are in this session believe in social entrepreneurship. They are convinced about it. But there's a call to action to them. And the call to action to them is to take this and replicate this across the world, right? To make it much more impactful. So with that, I want to thank all the panelists for their time and effort. I think they're from different parts of the world. We also thank our attendees that actually some people even showed up from Thailand to be here. We appreciate it and we thank you for being here. And we give you a big round of applause, a virtual applause. And with that, I end the ICSB Exchange webinar, and I announce tomorrow's ICSB Exchange webinar. And the title is grim, but there's hope to it. It's Australia, toughest year of our lives. And this was quoted by, I think, the Prime Minister there. And it's at 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Vicky will be running the show tomorrow night on this, and she's a great speaker, and she's in the midst of helping micro and small business in Australia. So we look forward to having Vicky join us tomorrow. I want to thank you all for coming again. This has absolutely been fantastic. I appreciate all your time, and have a wonderful and safe day.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.